T minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome in, everybody. Good morning. We are live from the $1 billion studio as we have the Brent Turvey interview. What's going on, Blue Devil? Hey, Mikey. I'm really excited for tomorrow night. Tomorrow's going to be such a long day, but it's going to be fun. So, I'm sure a lot of you have already seen this, and I haven't really watched it. I've tried to stay away from it. I've seen bits and pieces of it. And because I want to have the most genuine reaction possible. Hey, Mama, who doesn't know Batman for some reason. Very disappointed still. Hey, Deb. So, we have... Hey, Pixie. So, I'm sure a lot of you have already seen it. I've tried to stay away from it, like I said, to give the most genuine reaction. Apparently, apparently Donna Ratuno is actually very, very good. But I haven't really seen a whole lot of her stuff because I really don't care what other people say outside of a small group of creators. No, I got to go in tomorrow. So, yeah. Like Bubbles said, don't forget to leave some DNA on that like button. I promise I will do everything in my power to make sure that you aren't framed for murder in Idaho. If you leave your DNA over on that like button. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, become a part of the greatest community on this planet, possibly in the universe. Without further ado, yes, thank you, Bubbles. I haven't made a banner for her. So, without further ado, let's get into what this lawyer has to say. Because, well, by default, I don't like lawyers. And if I can get to the right window, there we are. I got too many windows up. Let's see what happens.
By the Kohberger defense team. I think in light of the fact that Bryan Kohberger has filed paperwork under a post-conviction theory to withdraw his plea, I think this conversation is going to be enlightening, and I can't wait to get into it. Talk to me about how you felt when you heard that Mr. Kohberger had filed this petition to withdraw his plea, and what was your reaction when you first heard that news?
Well, there's a number of ways that I reacted to it, but my first initial reaction as a person, as somebody who works in the justice system and observes it, was relief. I was relieved, mainly because of the way of what he said in his filing. It was some important facts and details came out that really haven't been covered at all. I mean, I want to take a moment to talk to you like a person, like you're a human being. I'm a human, you're a human.
Yeah, that's always interested me. Now, I came from the world of politics, so the mainstream media being completely inept is not particularly surprising to me. But what is surprising to me is there's not any real groundbreaking agenda for mainstream media to be covering a lot of this up. I mean, the media's job since day one of these United States 250 years ago was to be that unofficial fourth branch of government to make sure everybody else the other three stay in line. That's always been the media's job. And we have now gotten to the point where the media will go out of their way to cover up whatever the government tells them to cover up. And now it's gotten to this that has no political ramifications to it other than our rights are being taken away. The right to a fair trial gets replaced with plea deals. So, hey, Christy. Hey, hey, Shanna. I know I'm butchering that name. I do apologize. I'm just not awake enough. But anyway, let's get back into it.
We both have human emotions
Sure.
and have human responses to these things. And it's been, the word I would use is disgusting. It's been disgusting the way that most of the topics around this case have been talked about and shared and even ruminated and theorized over. And I'm grateful to be in this space with you because I know you're not like that. You're more of a facts and law, and that's how I prefer to meet this case because it's
Sure.
it's more productive that way. So really great relief.
For sure.
Primarily because so many things happen in that plea that people have only speculated about and continue to speculate about. And the first one is that that no one seems to be saying out loud, which is that Ann Taylor and her legal team were fired. They were just fired across the board. There's no getting away from that. What happened there?
When you say,
yeah, that's the thing that that's one of the things that we could just kind of gloss over in all of this madness. Bryan Kohberger fired Ann Taylor. The old Vince McMahon style, you're fired. Because that's exactly what Bryan Kohberger did when he filed that PCR.
fired, you mean that when he filed his petition, he did it on his own. So therefore, he obviously didn't ask them to do it. And then he asked for other counsel to be appointed to him. So is that what you're referring to when you say fired?
I don't know how we can see it any other way. That's the other problem we have with this.
No, I
case is
agree.
that-
That's just what I'm. No,
Yeah.
that's what I'm asking. I agree with that. I just
I
want to be
agree.
clear so people understand. Yeah.
Exactly. For those of us who work these kinds of cases, I mean, I do investigative cases for law enforcement. I do cases for prosecutors, and I also do cases for defense attorneys and civil attorneys. And then I also do post-conviction cases, quite a few of them, to review things done after the conviction has already occurred. And I think it's just interesting how people are tripping over themselves to try to describe this in another way, to try to give some leeway to what's happening or create some sort of intrigue or mystery about it. Kohberger laid it out pretty clearly what the issues were. And that's so my sense is relief that he is actually able to speak for himself as opposed to being suppressed by Ann Taylor. Ann Taylor no longer holds the privilege. The privilege is his, and he gets to decide what he wants to say.
And that's one of the things that I was very, very concerned about with this, because we knew Ann Taylor was. We were led to believe that Ann Taylor was very deep with Bryan. He was doing everything that she told him to do, and I was honestly believing, and that's why I was so surprised by the PCR that he came out with that, because again, I we were led to believe that Ann Taylor was kind of the was kind of the ringleader on this, and that Bryan Kohberger was kind of letting her run wild and do what she wants to do as it pertains to Bryan. So,
and that has not been true since the plea. And that's the other thing. It goes, if you want, we can go right into what the plea is and what he claims if you want. But that's, so my first reaction was relief, and now it seems like the real work might actually get done. Those are my sentiments.
Well, and before we, and I definitely want to get into the plea, but before we do that, let me ask you this. So, for the regular person who has no exposure to the criminal justice system, who hasn't sat in courtrooms the way you have or I have, we watch Bryan Kohberger sit in a court, right? And we watch the judge ask Bryan Kohberger a series of questions that he responded to. And we also saw that Bryan Kohberger filled out a piece of paper that basically, said, I am pleading guilty of my own free will, and, I'm satisfied with my counsel. So talk to me a little bit about how now, he's going to say, I want to withdraw all of this. And let's kind of go through that in terms of the plea. And, because to me, Bryan Kohberger does not seem like a dumb guy, right? Like, we're seeing his filings, we're seeing what he's written. And I'm kind of wondering how we reconcile this idea that he is an intelligent person. He was college educated. He was a teacher. He was a teacher's assistant. He was taking classes. And now, now we're hearing that he has written things to the court that are intelligent. So talk to me about how we reconcile this idea that he got up before a court, said all these things, and now he's saying, wait, this wasn't right. Like, why did he wait until now to bring those things up rather than say, I'm not going to plead guilty in the first place?
I'll just say is this: anybody who's questioning this process has obviously never been a criminal defendant charged with murder, and certainly not charged with capital murder. So second guessing this is kind of, it's one of those things that I find really unpalatable, because I've done this. I've worked probably 25, 30 death penalty cases in my career and testified to.
Yeah, he like, the people questioning this is absolutely insane, because we break it down all the way. It's pretty much a double check. Let's go through. Let's make sure, let's make sure we got the right guy. That's essentially what this is. So, anybody questioning that is, you should be looking at them funny.
Many of them. And what attorneys tell clients to do is shut up, don't make a face, don't respond, don't react, and above all, don't talk. Look straight ahead or take notes. That's the instruction given to every client, every defense client ever. All right. Whether or not they take that advice is something else. So from the perspective of Ann Taylor, from her legal team, he's a good client, doing what he's told, trying to maintain that stoicism, which cannot be judged. Because as you can see from this case, as I said at the outset of this interview, the response of the public has really been our worst selves. We've been our worst selves in responding to this, smacking our chops over the deaths of these young girls, making light, making jokes, making fake AI videos to purport a side or the other. It's been very grotesque. It's been a menagerie of the grotesque, in my opinion. He has been a good client. He has been doing what he's told. He has not been talking, as he's been told. He's been letting Ann Taylor and her legal team talk for him. And as you and I both know, up until the weekend before the plea, it was all, I'm innocent. I want to take this to trial. I want to take this to court. Now, the question is, why would he then get up there? Well, first of all, he didn't allocute. That's the first thing. The second thing, and it's clear from his filing, is he was told two things. One, you need to confess or to get a plea to take the death penalty off the table. That's what he was told by his attorneys. Bad advice across the board, but that was the advice he was given. Then the second thing that he was told, according
Yeah, the way that we do the death penalty, it needs to be changed because, especially with the way that when it comes to the public defender, because you have the state simultaneously trying to kill you and trying to save your life. And Lana, the little bit that I watched when she was reacting to this, Lana put it best. Like, I don't want you to save my life. I want you to protect my freedom. Lana from Truth and Transparency, she's the one that said that, and she's absolutely correct. And Taylor was only interested in saving his life. Freedom be damned.
to his filing, was that it's okay to lie about whether or not you did it, because that will set legal things in motion. And then we will start to do appeals and we'll start to do other things around that. But this will give us time. This is a time-saving device. That's what's heavily implied in his filing. So why would he do it? One, because he was told to. And then two, he was told it would not be of legal significance. Now, whether or not you and I would have believed that, if I had been in the room in that conversation, I would have said, what the f are you talking about? You don't tell people
Right.
to suborn perjury, knock that off right now. That's what I would have done.
Right.
But I wasn't in the room. I have no, and I happen to know now who was in the room, and I know exactly what was said. And it comports with the meeting that Ann Taylor had with us, which caused me to get up and walk out, which is that she basically said, I couldn't get him to take the plea initially. I couldn't get him to do it. So what did I?
Right there. That is grounds for ineffective assistance of counsel. Your job as a lawyer is to lay out everything for the client, lay out the options, lay out the roads. Where does this lead you? Where does that lead you? And then any questions that they have pertaining to that. And Ann Taylor was not doing that. Because, again, Ann Taylor was only interested in saving his life, not saving his freedom.
I went and I enlisted his family. I told him he had to do it. I gave him a horror show of what death row was going to be like. I told him what it was going to be like if he was, just in there as a regular inmate, not on death row. And it took more than a day and a half, maybe 2 days, to get the family to convince him to take the plea. So why did he do it? I mean, in my head, I've seen this kind of scenario play out before, but only with extremely unethical attorneys who don't want to go to trial for whatever reason.
I'm wondering.
No. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. So first we have Ann Taylor enlisting the family and pretty much pumping fear into, more specifically, his mother, his sisters, and getting them to beg Bryan to take the plea deal, making mom and sisters believe that if found guilty, they're going to fast track this thing and he'll be dead within the year. And Bryan, I think he's smart enough to know that that's not possible. However, when you're a mama's boy, which it seems like Bryan is, and granted I am too, you're going to do anything to get your mother to stop crying. Because your mother is absolutely terrified for your life here. And granted, a horrible situation, but a horrible situation is better than being in the ground. And for Ann Taylor to go to such extent to fearmonger the family, his own mother, to lie to his mother, to get her to believe that Bryan would be dead within the year if found guilty. That is, as Dr. Turvey put it, extremely unethical.
Why you wouldn't want to go to trial. Like, this was not a financial situation, right? The Kohbergers were not paying for his legal defense. The taxpayers of the state of Idaho were paying, so their bills were being paid. They work for a public defender's office, which obviously they are paid. So, and this is not a case where, I don't know, I think the majority of the public were expecting anybody to win. So I guess my question is, what do you really have to lose? And yeah, okay, the death penalty is one area of conversation, right? We can talk about the death penalty, but I know, and hopefully Bryan Kohberger understood that just because the state asks for the death penalty doesn't mean if you lose at trial, they're going to impose it on you, right? That is something that a jury decides after the fact. And, you can present mitigating evidence and things of that nature. And your mother can get up and talk about how awful it would be to know that her son is being put to death. And so there are ways to fight.
Now, here's the thing. With the trial itself, Ann Taylor had a royal flush in her hand. She had it on the river. And she folded, or she had the royal flush on the flop, and she folded on the river. And when Bill Thompson flipped up his cards, he had a 7-2 offsuit with jack squat. He had nothing. The state had nothing. And won. And people, and as soon as this plea deal came out, and we were kind of seeing everything, and people were still kind of praising Ann Taylor of, oh, she saved his life. Well, I guess as far as being able to stay above ground, yeah. But that's like that's essentially losing a race when you have a fully stocked Corvette to Volkswagen Bug with two wheels, with one side dragging onto the pavement. That's not an accomplishment. That's not something to write home to mom about. That's embarrassing.
Against the death penalty. So that was not a foregone conclusion if he were to go to trial and lose. So I guess I'm wondering, like, what do you think? I've always said as a lawyer, I will try anything, right? I am not in the business of trying to convince clients to take pleas. I, of course, have conversations with clients when offers are made to them, because that is our ethical obligation to do so. We must convey any offers made to clients. But in 26 years of doing this, I have never twisted anybody's arm. And I say to them, you live with the consequence of your decision. You want me to go in there and fight for you? I'll fight for you. So what do you think, what do you think they had to lose here by going to trial? I mean, they fought pretty hard throughout the pendency of the case. They obviously hired experts to try to put them in a position that was better at trial. So I'm just wondering, like, what do you think it was ultimately that she just didn't want to fight? Because frankly, the fight that was going on, as long as it was a fight. The trial aspect of it isn't really that difficult once you're...
I can answer that question for Donna, because all the court proceedings that we've seen throughout this entire case, from beginning to the plea deal, is akin to WWE. Predetermined outcome. It is a show. It is for entertainment purposes. Nothing was actually real.
Prepared. So I'm just wondering what you think happened here.
I have some speculations, but first let me just say, Donna, I wish you had been there. I wish you had been in the room. I wish you had given that advice. That was not, he was not getting that advice. That's the first thing. So one, he had no advocates for him in that room. He had only people that wanted him to plea out because they didn't want to go to trial. Two, he didn't have all the information about all the exculpatory evidence that we had found. He didn't know that. He didn't know what the defense team had uncovered. And it's not me by myself. None of this stuff, according to his filing and according to other things that I'm aware of, he wasn't provided any of the defense reports. He didn't even know I existed until I went on a podcast. So that's its own little separate.
I called this back in May. I called this. You can go back and look at the video. The thumbnail is, what did Bryan actually know? Or what did Bryan know? It was something along those lines. I asked those questions. Did Bryan know that he had mountains of exculpatory evidence in his favor? Did he know all that? And Brent Turvey is confirming they didn't. All he knew is that he was dead to rights. He didn't know he was sitting on a royal flush. And I called this back in May.
And we know that because he told somebody that, or how do we know that? Because if that's the case,
I'll
that's
disclose something that I have not disclosed yet, which I think is important to know. And that is that after I did Queens of Custody and your podcast, the family reached out to me and like, who the hell are you? And what are you doing on this case?
All right, you got it. Now the custody queens got to change their names. They're now the Queens of Custody. Which, okay.
And why haven't we heard of all this stuff before? And then I immediately like, okay, well, let's talk. And then I handed them off to people who had legal minds, which I do not. So I was like, sure. I feel your pain. I understand what you're saying. The next step has to be legal steps that I can't be involved in. So you need to go do that. There are things that have to happen that I can't be a part of. And that's what happened. So I got told by the family directly that they had not received that stuff.
I mean, that's
the next thing
that's troubling. That's troubling.
Very troubling. It gets worse. It's way worse than you can possibly imagine. Way worse than I even worried about. I always game out the worst case scenarios and then I sort of prepare for them, hope for the best, plan for the worst kind of deal. And it's way worse. The family has not spoken yet because they're frightened out of their minds about what's going to happen the next time they speak. The vultures will descend, the legal.
And that's what a lot of us believe. Dago believed that. I kind of believed it. That Kohberger's family was threatened. And they have health issues of their own. I think his dad's heart's not very strong. Just a lot of things that if they were to speak out, all hell breaks loose. I mean, with this case, absolutely everything is on the table of what could have happened.
Consequences. They've been told to be quiet for this whole time, and they've also done the same thing. Notice Bryan Kohberger did not allocute because he couldn't, because he didn't know what happened. His family has not spoken out other than the sister giving one interview. And even that, after that, she's now a little gun shy, but they're trying to talk, but they really don't have the facility to do that. They don't trust anybody and they shouldn't. But Kohberger himself in his filing makes this very real and says, I didn't know any of this stuff. I wasn't being told anything. I wasn't being given good advice. And I was told the opposite of some of the things that are occurring right now. And he is, as any good client does, has held his water this entire time because the person who speaks for him is Ann Taylor. And in lockup, he had no ability. Well, in lockup, he was even more limited by what he could say and who he could say it to. Now, I'll give you one other piece of information that I learned from the Kohberger family. She hasn't spoken to him since the plea. So she's in court representing him without even talking to him.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
So
that
let me,
scenario? So the questions you're
can't.
asking are really for Ann Kohberger. Why didn't you share this exculpatory material? And why aren't you talking to your client?
Yeah, I mean, that just makes no sense to me. And when I
He just went full-blown Kermit meme.
look at this, and I want to be really clear, so people that
it
are
makes sense to
listening or
me.
watching
In my little
understand.
brain, it makes sense to me, but
Yeah.
we can speculate
Well,
as to
sure,
why.
sure. Well, and when I look at this, and I want people who are listening or
Hey, Tomboy, go Dogs.
watching to understand, there is a very big difference between the atrocities and the horrific things that happened to these 4 young college students and the court process. And so, everybody out there is talking about how awful this is for the families to have to relive this, and this is coming back. And it is. It's awful. It's awful that it ever happened in the first place. But I think every person of every family member would want to make sure that whoever was put behind bars for this is actually the person who did it. And so,
Well,
I've
I will
always
say
thought,
that's generally true, but I won't just speak out on this very issue because it's one of the things that disgusts me the most. I've never seen a family try to sell their daughter's story like this before, ever. Going to Crime Con, trying to get different documentary deals. I'm disgusted by that. I wouldn't even think to do that as an expert, and I have access to everything. I'll talk to you and we'll have a professional conversation, but not for money.
sure.
And certainly I wouldn't, anybody who's out there trying to sell a story for money, that's grotesque.
And and I'm not going to judge what people do when they're put in the most horrific situations. I mean, obviously we can have personal opinions on.
Shots fired at the G's. Shots fired. Oh my. I mean, I can't disagree with him. My empathy for the G family is gone. I'm over it. They have shown time and time again they're more concerned about the almighty dollar. They're more concerned about their family name than anything else. But yeah, Mystic's 1000% correct. At this point, the only people that have my full sympathy is the Mogans and the Kernodles.
On it, but in terms of just being, and again, you have to remember that these are people that are talking to one side, right? They're talking to the prosecutors.
And on top of all that, and Lana brought this point up a while back, that WSU lawsuit, anybody want to take a guess on who's not in that? Who should be in that it isn't? If they really want answers. Bryan's not a part of it. Bryan's not in it. You can get him up there for deposition. He can't plead the fifth for anything. Well, now he can because of the PCR. But for a full year, you could have gotten him for deposition. And he would have had to... hey, sissy. You would have had to... he would have had to answer. But they didn't. Why? Why would that be, chat? Why wouldn't they add Bryan Kohberger to that lawsuit? Because they know Bryan wouldn't be able to tell them what actually happened that night. They wouldn't get any answers from Bryan. They know there is absolutely nothing that he can say that would make sense because he wasn't there. They know that.
They're looking at what the prosecutors are showing them. They're believing, what they hear. But prosecutors sit down with family members prior to pleas and talking about strength of evidence, and they do that in terms of actual facts or physical exhibits or things like that. That might be a little bit different. But I do think that from a practical standpoint, even people who it's very difficult to relive this. I would think that even at some point, your logical brain would take over and you would say, okay, if this really isn't the guy, then we want to make sure that we find the guy. But now let me ask you this question, because here's the practical side of this. This is a very difficult thing to overcome for Bryan Kohberger, right? Taking back a plea, putting yourself in a position to actually have a trial and to be able to plead not guilty. This is a legal burden that is very high. And so I'm wondering where you think this goes next for him. Do you think legally he has enough to go into the court and say, you know what, my lawyer was ineffective and didn't do a good job? And I'm, the legal standard's high. And I'm just wondering because, the courts give a lot of deference to lawyers saying that was strategic. They made a decision. They decided not to do this. Now, it's a little different when you're talking about a plea versus a trial that went bad.
You're absolutely correct. It's a very high and very difficult legal burden for anyone to overcome. And this is not a regular case. It's a case with exceptional circumstances. The first issue is he didn't allocute. That's the first thing that always sticks out to me. It really bothered me that he didn't allocute, and that caused a lot of problems.
Same.
Because that's supposed to happen. But let's take a step back.
Now, Idaho tries to hide behind the oh, we can't make him allocute, we can't do this, we can't do that. Well, I mean, yeah, you can. It's all a part of a plea deal. You can add that in the plea deal. You don't get it unless you allocute. And of course, they're going to hide behind, oh, we can't legally do that. Yeah, you can.
And ask ourselves what we don't know. Who was the NBC Dateline leak? Wasn't me.
Correct.
It wasn't. The Ada County Sheriff's Department's investigating Ann Taylor's office. That would have been, and the special master who would do the investigation knew before the plea who it was, and they put that on file and they sealed it. Bryan Kohberger doesn't know who that leak was. It didn't help him. It hurt him badly. So he should know. If Ann Taylor knows, and she definitely knows, she would have to know because she's part of that sealed material. She would have to have reviewed it. She certainly didn't pass that along to Kohberger. So that's a problem. That's the first little hurdle there that's going to contextualize why he wasn't looped in and why he was coerced into taking this deal and why he was told to lie, why he was told to perjure himself. And again, this is something that people do all the time under the stress and duress of a defense attorney telling him, I'm not taking this to trial. For what is it, like a third, 30% of all of the people who are exonerated by the Innocence Project basically confessed and took a plea deal at the urgence of their defense attorney because they were frightened they were going to lose a trial. That's a third. That's not a joke. That's something we have to think about how our legal system works. The next thing is that if this, I really appreciate that Judge Hippler appeared on paper, at least, to be taking this seriously by accepting the filing and then appointing him a new attorney. I don't know. It concerns me that it's a small town attorney that's got a 1-star rate. It concerns me a bit who the attorney is, but maybe he's better than we know. And maybe he's got death experience that we don't know about. So that's the next part. It's not just about the legal hurdles. It's about the confidence and quality of your representation, right? But the other thing is that it's the next step that has to happen in the process. You've done this before, I'm certain. And I don't know whether you ever worked with Innocence Networks before, but I have through my entire career. In fact, I started working with the Innocence Project. My first big case, high profile case, was the West Memphis case. and I worked directly with the Innocence Project out of Cardozo Law in that case. And the process and the metrics and the intake ability of a Innocence Project is dependent upon all the other appeals being denied or completed, those processes completed. So in terms of it being a stepping stone towards other legal avenues, you have to knock them down one at a time, right? One thing at a time. You can't just skip to the end, right? So
Right.
I see it as a big legal hurdle. I fear that Ann Taylor is going to be in a lot more trouble than she thinks, because the communications that she had with everyone are documented. They're all documented. So all that stuff is going to come out. She no longer holds the privilege, Kohberger does. And if he gets his day in court, a hearing, which I worry that he won't, then all that stuff could come in. All those communications with family members and Kohberger himself, which he would want to have come out about the nature and extent of the coercion to him and his family by the attorney team. Right? We're not living in the old days where it's somebody's word. We don't take people at their word anymore because we can't. We have digital evidence we can use, text messages, video calls, video chats. The very evidence that we collected, we should have all collected in this case and disclosed initially, which took years to disclose, is the very evidence that would be presented in this court, in this type of hearing. So I'm not as pessimistic as you are, but I am realistic, which is I know what the hurdles are. And as you said, Mr. Kohberger is not an idiot either. So for him to put this on the table tells me that he's ready to go. And I don't think that his legal team is prepared for what he's going to present.
Well, and I think to your point about if we just start back with the original Dateline leak, I mean, if that comes back, that came from his own lawyers, I mean, right there, you put him in a position where he was never
or one of his
defended
experts
properly.
at the direction of the attorney, right? And not just the attorney team, but also you got 3 attorneys and their assistants, and then you've also got, kind of a rogue defense expert right now going out there saying contrary things, and
talking about Blu-ray, Sire, like, yeah, I would imagine there would be some sort of recordings, transcripts of everything that was said between Bryan and Ann, especially in the settings that they were, just so. And I feel like it would be standard operating procedure. That way defense attorneys can cover their own ass, or attorneys can do that, and so on and so forth. Like, granted, it would be confidential up until somebody says ineffective assistance of counsel. And then that all comes to light when Bryan waives his attorney-client privilege, and we can see it all, and we'll see it all in that hearing. That I would be absolutely stunned if Hippler said no, because Hippler is a absolute and total control freak. He loves control. Hey, Micro.
So we don't know. All we know is police think it came from the defense. And I know it wasn't.
If that's the case, I mean, that is just, crazy. Now, let's talk about the evidence that they do believe, right, that they had against Kohberger from this whole time. And I know we talked about it last time you were on. I know it's part of Christopher Whitcomb's Broken Plea book. But talk to me again about, they basically found Bryan Kohberger based on the DNA that they got from the IgG DNA testing on the knife sheath. And I know that part of the big contention here is that knife sheath, the chain of custody wasn't proper, where it was found versus where it was in photos, all of those things. So talk to us again about really, because that really was the only piece of evidence they had other than the description of a vehicle, right? They didn't really have anything else. So that's what led them to Bryan Kohberger. So talk to me again about that and then what the issues were with that chain of custody, because I think it's important for people to remember that while they're listening today.
All right. So two things. One is that we don't know. As I'm sitting here today, I cannot confirm to you by any forensic metric or by any judicial testimony or any unsworn testimony, anything like that. I cannot attest to you that I know for sure how Bryan Kohberger became a suspect. What I do know is at every opportunity, there was deflection, there was dissembling, and there was withholding by law enforcement about how that exactly happened.
Yeah. We still haven't gotten point A. How did we get to Bryan? We got, he did it. How'd he get there? He drove his car. Well, the car doesn't match what we see in the footage. But his phone, yeah, his phone doesn't match up with that car. But he used a portal. Yeah, he used a portal to get there.
One, or by any judicial testimony or any that we don't know. As I'm sitting here today, I cannot confirm to you by any forensic metric or by any judicial testimony or any unsworn testimony, anything like that. I cannot attest to you that I know for sure how Bryan Kohberger became a suspect. What I do know is at every opportunity, there was deflection, there was dissembling, and there was withholding by law enforcement about how that exactly happened. At one point, you have a probable cause statement saying it was from an informant. And then at one point, it's the IGG. And then you have the experts in DNA being fired on both sides. I mean, it's just like nobody was getting the answers that they wanted and people were getting terminated. It's one of the weirdest cases ever. This was an issue that should have been resolved with testimony under oath and documentation provided by the state. They have yet to provide that clearly, in my opinion. So I cannot tell you that.
Yeah.
And the fact that I can't tell you that should tell you that they're still, faffing about it to try to create, they're searching for a narrative still, I think.
And in terms of what you were able to review, do you know if you were given access to all of the evidence or were you given access to certain pieces of evidence? How do you know that what Ann Taylor allowed you to look at was actually everything she had?
I'm smiling because I really love this question from prosecutors or attorneys when I'm on the stand. So did you look at everything? And the answer to that, there's only one answer to that is, how can I possibly know the answer to that?
Well,
I couldn't know if I've seen everything.
But
I can tell you this. Ann Taylor gave experts like myself access to a OneDrive on Google Drive that was called Expert One or whatever. And anytime you wanted to access it, you had to log in, put in the password. That would send her an email and she would send you a text message with the verification code. Okay, so pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And I have a problem with any of that.
So, yeah, just about a lot of the conspiracy theories that were talked about in this case have turned out to be true. The only difference between a conspiracy theory and the narrative is which side of the badge you're on. That's the only difference. And the conspiracy theories are based on facts. The narrative that has been put forth it's not based on facts. It's based on a singular goal to get to a singular point. And every other fact and evidence be damned.
What I do know is I thought I was given, I asked for certain things. I make a list of things that I asked for. It's a pro forma list I asked for in every case. And so I do that. And then we go to Idaho to do the evidence viewing, which I do in almost every case that I can. I do an evidence viewing to see what they got, to check chains of custody, to check, like I was just in a case in Washington. It was a double homicide. And I had an item, and no fault of anybody. This was just an innocent mistake. Somebody collected an item and it said stun gun on it, right? I open up the bag. It's a flashlight, not a stun gun. There's no stun gun in there. Okay. This was just a mistake. Okay. And I wouldn't, it will get mentioned, but it's not, there isn't a lot of other mistakes around that. Do you know what I mean? So it was an error.
Got it. Yeah, of course.
Somebody thought it was a stun gun and that's how they labeled it. And, you know, they got a new system. They're working on this particular location. It's all, you know, I'm not out for blood. I just want to know what happened. In this case, I went there.
Sure.
And there were two sets of evidence. One is the evidence that the law enforcement collected. And it was the mattress from Ethan and the knife sheath that was collected. Both of them have falsified change of custody. Both of them, it's not just a knife sheath, it's a couple other things. And many of the other items have correct change of custody on them with multiple people signing them. So we know that they know how to do it correctly. And it's not improper, it's illegal. It's a falsification of evidence. It's actually tampering with evidence. That would be the charge. And also false swearing. You can't lie. It's a sworn document that you're filling out. So it's not like
of course.
Oops, I slipped and fell and filled it out for everybody wrong. No. That's not what happened. How did I know whether or not I had received everything from Ann Taylor? I can tell you that I didn't, because when I got to the bed frame that Ann Taylor's team had forced the police to collect before they destroyed the house, along with many other bloody items that the police did not want to check, did not want to collect, I found the hair on it, in this item. I'm like, what is going on here? This is looks like a palm print on the side, and then there's all this hair there. Whose is this? And I look at it, it's Ethan's, the bed frame. It's white with wooden slats. And I'm like, what's this? And they're like, oh, that's the hair. Don't worry about that. We'll talk to you about that later. So we go back and we talk about it later, and they disclosed to me new autopsy photos that they hadn't given to me before. And other photographs that they'd taken of that, defense photographs that they had taken of the house before it was demolished, that they had not given to me. So they were playing their cards very close to the vest.
Why are you not giving your expert everything pertaining to what he needs? That alone right there, once again, ineffective assistance of counsel. That is insane. It could, but that chain of custody is going to be one hell of a. It's going to be a biatch to figure out. Well, here's the thing: they're not trying to find out who did it. They are trying to put together a patsy with a believable story that the NPCs will sit there, nod along, and go right off the cliff with them.
In terms of sharing material, even with me, which I found to be, I let them know that was not okay. You got to share with me everything, because I anticipate being on stand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm going to get this question from a very smart prosecutor named Donna, who's going to ask me, how do you know you've seen everything? And I'm going to have to throw you under the bus, and I'll do it.
That's right. That's right. Say, sorry, I don't know that answer. They filed so many pretrial motions here. There was a lot of pretrial litigation in this case. And I don't remember any pretrial litigation dealing with chains of custody and whether or not certain items should be used, right? I think they did do it on the knife sheath, right? But I don't know if they did it on anything else.
They didn't know until like a month. No, it was like maybe a few weeks before the plea, because it got brought. One of the investigators brought a question to my attention, which led us down this rabbit hole. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. Because I don't think like that. I don't think that people are lying. But I also think as a scientist, which is that if I see something wrong in one spot, I know I got to look in the other spots too. I can't just now accept it without question. So you're always supposed to be checking change of custody. And I'd love to take credit for finding everything, but I didn't. I'm the forensic scientist though. So if an investigator brings me a piece of evidence and asks me about it, then I give my opinion, then that becomes evidence. And then it causes us to look at other things. And the change of custody were all falsified on those as well.
I mean, that would have been an amazing pretrial motion, because then you put that out there, you show the weakness, and then you put the police officers on the stand and they have to answer to this. And, you know, I'm still trying cases. I did a jury last week and I had a police officer admit to me that, yes, evidence helps. Well, gee, go figure. Yes, it does. And so it's amazing. Yeah, it was such an amazing answer. And so, you know, I look at this and I think to myself, these are defense dreams, right? These types of motions, to be able to put this out there and possibly not only cut through evidence, but if you cut through enough evidence that the prosecution can't use, and if a judge tosses it out, or even if the judge doesn't toss it out, you're preserving all these rights on appeal. It just is amazing to me that, given all the other work that they did, and maybe you're right, maybe this comes down to the fact that she realized she was going to have some issues with regard to these leaks, and thought, we better get out of this case as quickly as we can. And if that's the case, that is an injustice to everyone in this case, not only Bryan Kohberger, but everyone.
I will submit to you that the misconduct goes further than just Ann Taylor. It goes to Becca Barlow, it goes to the other attorney, and it goes to their forensic psychologist, who was behaving in a way that is completely improper. And certainly
He threw Becca under the bus. That one I didn't see coming. He lumped them all together and just, yep, boom, right under that bus.
that was my experience with her, but also was the experience of Mr. Kohberger. She was there, instead of in her role as an evaluator, she was doing all kinds of other things that she shouldn't be doing. And I've worked so many death penalty cases. The lines are so very clear about what your role is, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, the types of communication that you have, difference between treatment and diagnosis, which is a therapeutic position, and then assessment of mental faculty for a forensic assessment, a forensic position. These two areas are in conflict, and you can't have the same person doing both. And so in this case, the lines were so blurred for everybody, myself not included, because I've done this so many times. I protect myself very carefully because I anticipate testimony and I anticipate having to answer questions under oath. And I alone can be held accountable, whereas somebody who's not going to testify, or a lawyer, will not be held to account the same way. So I agree with you. It's a travesty, but I think what I think people need to understand from this is that it is far worse than most people understand. The conduct that was engaged in by the defense team, the conduct that was engaged in by the person who made the leak, depending on who that is, the lack of transparency of the defense team to Mr. Kohberger.
So is Brent Turvey is pointing at somebody in Ann Taylor's camp being the almighty leak. Wait. Possible the hair is another victim's and was placed in Ethan's hand to throw off investigators, give the impression that Ethan was the killer. And all of that would be a little too strategic. You can hear in the 227 scream that there was fighting and arguing beforehand. So there is a part of me that thinks that this was there is a part of me that thinks this could have been a spur of the moment, just slaughtering. But I'm still leaning on that this was planned out for at least a week out, if not more.
And all the other allegations of being coerced. I mean, he's not going to make that allegation unless he has the evidence. And if she's communicating with him over text messages, well, guess what?
Right, exactly. And the real travesty, beyond, obviously locking up somebody if you don't have the proof, but the real travesty too is if let's say that the judge says, you know what, Mr. Kohberger, we're going to let you withdraw your plea. We're going to start this over from the beginning. I mean, the expense alone to the taxpayer to have to do this again would be horrible. I mean, lawyers take oaths, and if you can't trust that your own lawyer is going to do what's best for you, or at least put you in a position where you make the decision, right? Here's all the evidence. Here's Dr. Turvey's report. Here's everybody else's findings. Here's what we've discovered. And at the end of the day, they're offering to take the death penalty off the table. Do you want it or not based on the evidence? That's one thing, right? And there's a lot of people who I think should go to trial that sometimes don't because they don't want to take the risk. And that's a decision that clients make. But that is completely different than being put in a position where you're not told about pieces of evidence, or you're not told about strength of evidence, or you're not told about the way experts view evidence. That's a completely separate conversation.
Yes. So to your first point, let's talk about the money, because that's been covered a lot. And I think it's important for people to understand that the death penalty is expensive. It's one of the reasons why many states stopped doing it, because when you are working a case and you're working, now let me give you full disclosure. My contract was for about 25 grand. That's about $10,000 more than I normally make on a given case. All right. And that's disclosing a lot, because most experts don't like to talk about money. If I worked only for the prosecution, I'd be able to charge between $150,000 and $200,000 per case. I don't do that. I work for either side. The money is not what's important to me. Most of the money is not going to have a lot of money will be spent by the defense, but most of the money will be spent by the state, all right, to try to make their case. I have not seen cases spend this much money in a long time, and this much money for so little result. The money shouldn't even be the conversation. The conversation should be, how did we spend this much money and we still don't have answers from the prosecution, or we have overstated, overcompetent evidence? And I can tell you it's because they basically, handed the investigation and the forensics over to the FBI and let them do it, and just kind of like, well, we don't really know anything about that. We'll let you do it. And the FBI were overconfident and wrote reports that said one thing and then had to testify in a way that reduced their confidence about the car, about the DNA, about how people were found, about the cell tower stuff. I mean, it's all just too disgusting. Again, it's disgusting for me to spend this amount of money and not have straight answers from anybody on the state side. Everybody having to reduce themselves. They took this very 100% posture of guilt, and then you get them under oath, and all of a sudden it's 70%, maybe 80%. I don't know. So there is the money issue. Yeah, but the money issue, when you are morally certain that the death penalty is the right thing for your state, it's going to cost you, because we do not put people to death in this country when we think that they might be innocent, right? That's a rule. Sure. I mean, we don't kill innocent people, right? We can agree with that. I hope we don't want to.
I mean, we're not supposed to. Idaho sure as hell is ready to do it. I mean, this was a death penalty case, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the evidence that you were going to present to put somebody on death row. That's any other circumstance. This is attempted murder. Any other circumstance, this is attempted murder.
Kill innocent people. So in the search for truth, resources will be expended, not just money, but time and effort and emotions and all that good stuff. So that's the first thing. What I would expect is if Hippler says, I'm going to grant it for you, let's start over. Great. Let's get a real death qualified attorney that actually has experience working in death penalty trials. Not somebody who's a dealer who knows how to make a plea and has maybe worked a couple cases. I mean, somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Because this is a case where now everybody's sort of on the line. The second thing is, if anybody on the side of the state or the defense has engaged in misconduct, they have opened themselves up to litigation and lawsuits. I worked on a case in Connecticut what was it, versus Birch and Henning, the Birch and Henning case. These were, it was a home invasion where the only evidence in the case was DNA from blood alleged to have been found on a towel. That was the only evidence, all right, in the whole case. And I did the examination of that evidence in the case, and I found that the expert in that case had falsified that item. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court of Connecticut. That expert was Henry Lee, my mentor. Now, what happened?
Wow.
He got sued personally, and he got sued to the tune of $30 million, and he lost. He refused to show up to defend himself. He knew what he had done. He had dry labbed this result for the police. There was a bunch of other cases that were going on at the same time where the same allegations were being made. But this was back in 2011. So when experts lie, there should be consequences. And in many states, there are.
Sure,
When
just like
lawyers
police
lie
or
for
anybody.
support
Yes,
and perjury,
absolutely.
there should be consequences. And that's a separate conversation. What I'm concerned about is people have already kind of decided, well, he's guilty, so he's done. He already said he was guilty. Again, 1/3 of defendants who are investigated by the Innocence Project are found to have been wrongfully convicted. 1/3 of them were coerced by their defense attorneys. This is a common concept. I am so grateful to you as an attorney, as a criminal justice professional, that you and I can meet, regardless of the side that we take, on this very even plane of, hey, we don't do that. We let the client decide. Right. You give them my job is to educate attorneys educate the client, and my job then becomes maybe educate the court, maybe educate the jury, but ultimately there's.
Yeah, Cass. He brought that up for a reason. I'm thinking that Turvey believes that DNA on the knife sheath, that was created in a lab. That's what that looks like, ladies and gentlemen. And that he understands. Because that was his mentor in Connecticut. That was his mentor. Brent Turvey understands how the importance of not doing illegal crap when investigating a death penalty case. If things go the way that they think they will, Bryan Kohberger is going to be a very, very rich individual. And then I wouldn't say Turvey is the, well, yeah, I guess he's the whistleblower. And the magic with Turvey is he did it within the bounds of the law. Whitcomb was, I mean, how do I put this? Whitcomb was the megaphone for Brent Turvey. Now, granted, Whitcomb had added his own little flavor to it and kind of diminished it, but still got the job done nonetheless. I mean, that just shows how effective Brent Turvey is. Whitcomb completely Whitcomb kind of diminished Turvey's voice, and Turvey's voice still got through. Wonder if they got Bryan due to info and had when he wanted to ride along and do an internship. Yeah, that's what a lot of people are thinking. That's what I think Birdie was digging into that deeply.
There's a trier of fact that's going to come in and make a decision. And we want them to have the best and fullest and most complete set of information that exists. You and I can agree on that without getting mad at each other. That's not the world we live in
Absolutely.
Right now. Nobody wants anybody to have a fair shake. Nobody wants anybody to the truth to come out. People decide who the monsters are, and then they go down that road. instead of doing the investigation.
It's interesting you say that because just this last week I did a jury and it was an attempted murder case, and the client had another lawyer for the first 7 years that his case was pending. And we came in, and I think in about 8 months decided to take the case to trial. And this guy was trying to push this guy to take a deal every which way from Sunday. And we came in and I talked to him about that deal, and I talked to him about why it was less of a risk because it was much less time than he would serve if he lost. But at the end of the day, he has a right to have his day in court. And we tried that case, and that jury came back in about 4.5 hours with a not guilty. So, you have to be able to, and for clients that say, I did not do this, I am actually innocent, and I want to have my day in court, then they're willing to take a risk.
That's exactly right. If you have somebody who's guilty and they get a good plea deal, they're going to take it, right? And that's the problem.
Yeah.
That sets up a stereotype. And if you apply that stereotype or that caricature of a defendant,
I'm going to be right back. I'm going to let it play.
To Bryan Kohberger, you're going to miss all the important information and facts and details underneath the surface that are going on that he has not been talking about. Like I said, he's been a good client as far as I can tell, by virtue of doing what he was told, as well as his family, and keeping their mouths shut.
Talk to me a little bit about the hair that was found in Ethan Chapin's hand. I know we talked about this originally. This is something that's gotten a lot of communication online and otherwise, and that the hair did not match Bryan Kohberger's, but there's some inconclusive facts out there. And again, because the prosecutors really didn't answer and because Kohberger didn't really allocute, there's still a lot of questions surrounding that hair. The police are saying it was tested, it wasn't Kohberger's, that it was Chapin's himself. Now, is that true, or do we have no idea who that hair belongs to?
Nobody who's under oath is saying that, and no report says that it belongs to Ethan.
That is a very, very important distinction. Nobody under oath is saying that it's Ethan's. I will absolutely not behave. As soon as you've gone, I'm going to be an absolute menace. Have a good one, Bubbles. But yeah, that is a very big distinction to be making. Nobody, there isn't an expert testimony. There is nothing that points to that being Ethan's hair. No experts are saying that. So whose hair is it?
That is where our world exists. So anybody who's saying these is guessing. They're saying maybe it's in, maybe it's not. Just like Ann Taylor and her team said, they asked me, what if it belongs to somebody in the house? I'm like, well, maybe it does. We need to find out who that is and how it got in his hand, right? Because that would wreck the timeline. Well, let's talk about what does exist, okay? The hair, my first encounter was the hair on the bed frame. And it was like probably 20, 30 strands, about that long, coming off the bed frame, attached in blood on the bed frame with Ethan's
That's a lot. I mean, 20, 30 strands, that's a lot. Yeah.
It's way more than that. Okay. So, but that's what I could see. I can show you the pictures right now if you want to. But the pictures of the hair on the bed frame and that are also attached to the wall is even more. There's even a bigger clump from what's on the bed frame attached to the wall. When they pulled it away, there's a nice little streak of blood. When they pulled it away, there's hair attached to the wall and sealed to the wall with blood. And it's even more than that amount of hair. Then we have the hair that's in his hand, the phone was taken at the crime scene. Okay, so there's 3 different photos. So anybody who has not looked at all the evidence and who is speaking on issues that they don't know anything about because they're not a reconstructionist or not a forensic scientist, anybody who's saying that those hairs doesn't exist, it means that they haven't looked at the evidence and aren't aware of what's going on in the case. They viewed the case through their very narrow aperture. I did crime scene analysis and reconstruction, which means my hands were in everything. All right, so those photographs exist. And not only that, they were leaked online. There are people that have put these photographs online and put them into nice collages for everybody to see. So the first hurdle to clear is, do they exist? Yes. Then when the police wrote a report about it, it was described in the autopsy report and the police reports as debris in his hands. There was no debris in his hands. It was just human.
Yeah, we have seen the photos. We have seen we've seen them. It exists. And yet the G family will sit there and say, "Oh, it doesn't exist. Get the fuck off my page." I'm sorry. You mean to tell me that you have the potential of actual DNA to find out who murdered your daughter? And you're going to stick your head in the sand. Why would that be, Steve? Christy? Olivia? Why are you so afraid of the correct answer? Let me ask you that question. Why so afraid of what the correct answer is? I don't have the ISP photos. I lost the link to them. They were my bookmarks, but they're gone.
Human hair, all right? A clump of it in his hands, then some stuck to the bed frame, and then some stuck to the wall. That hair was of such significance that they sent it off to the FBI lab, who looked at it under a microscope and said, these hairs do not share similar characteristics. Therefore, there's no DNA testing needed to be done. And Bryan Kohberger is excluded. These are the facts. These are not Brent Turvey's speculations. This is what exists on the record. Now, have you heard anything about that? Other than through me? No. No one wants to talk about it. Why? Because it would upend the case. It would upend everything. It would change everything we think about the timeline, the narrative, the interaction, who was in what room. But there's other evidence. There's down in the first floor bedroom, we have the jacket that didn't get collected or tested properly. We have a bloody bracelet that was on the floor that got picked up and moved by police and put on one of the desks and ignored and not collected. We have many different items of evidence like that weren't exactly examined or considered in the timeline because they got lost or forgotten or just plain ignored because they didn't fit the narrative. I come back to the same thing every time. When you
now, that's the important part, Micro. It's all about the money. It's not even about answers. It's all about the money. Because if you were about the answers to this case, then you would have Bryan Kohberger named in that lawsuit. You would be suing Bryan Kohberger civilly for wrongful death. But they're not. Why? Why?
Want to know what happened, you examine the evidence. When you want to know what the truth is, you pursue that evidence to find out whose it is, how it got there, conditions of transfer, and what that means for the entirety of the reconstruction of the case. And there's not a real interest in doing that. In fact, they were so disinterested in doing that they demolished the house. I never even heard of that before, where you demolished the house.
I know, me neither.
And then they created this 3D model of it that I went out again to examine and took my photographs and did a 3D scan of it. It doesn't even match the interior of the house. It's full of incorrect access, incorrect sizes. It says big sign under, not the scale. They wanted to use it as a trial exhibit. Didn't have anything in it. Didn't have anything to do with the case. Just an approximation of maybe what the house might have looked like inside. We're not sure.
I'm going to say that I feel like no matter which way you fall on this, right? Whether you think Bryan Kohberger did it, whether you think he didn't do it, no matter what you think, I think everyone that's paid attention to this case has always wanted to see a trial here, because a trial was either going to expose that there was or there wasn't enough evidence, and a trial could potentially answer the question why or how. And so no matter how you feel about this, no one got those answers. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Judge Hippler does and see if we ever get those answers. But no matter what happens, I'm sure, Dr. Turvey, I will want to talk to you about it. So I hope you'll be back with me, and I thank you so much.
All right, so that was the interview from Crime and Justice with Donna Rotuno, tomato. Now, in this trial, we're probably not going to get the who, and we're not going to get the why. If this goes to trial, we're going to know who didn't do it, which means we're not going to get the why. Because again, there is zero evidence against Bryan Kohberger in this case. And Turvey laid it all out for him. There is nothing connecting Bryan Kohberger to anyone. So, of course, we have the G family. They pipe up again. There it is. Christy puts, I'm going to leave this right here so you can all watch, so all of you can watch. Tomorrow, I will be coming back to it. For those who don't know, this is Brent Turvey, a defense expert on the case that unethically violated his NDA with Ann Taylor. You notice how Ann Taylor, in that scathing statement, never, ever, ever mentions exactly what? You guys notice that? You notice that? Because Brent Turvey didn't. He has something to say about our family. I want his evidence on his accusations about our family. Well. Well, every interview you take a dig at Kaylee. There's that. The WSU lawsuit, that doesn't include Bryan Kohberger. There's that. And you got 18 different stories about how you found out and what happened that morning and why you didn't go to Moscow when you had family members saying Kaylee had been shot. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And I will be looking forward to see if later today she comes out with a long post, because I will react to it, because I'm going to be live later on tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. And it was originally going to be going back to the beginning, which eventually we're going to do that. But I'm going to be reacting to Accomplished Days videos that just came out about, it's like the Holiday Inn or something like that. I'm sure it'll be on my homepage. Yeah, the Quality Inn stay. Some interviews from them. So, and as per usual, I'm going to stay away from it like it's the plague until tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll be going live again, and we'll dig more into that. So, make sure to hit the like button on your way out. Thank you, sissy. And we'll see you all later tonight. Cheers.